Facts versus feelings, face bye-mageddon with confidence, managing expectations. It's a cornerstone to modern-day living. A mantra employed by tech bros and youth soccer coaches alike. A well-intentioned warning that caps hope in order to guard against disappointment. Though I'm not sure what's worse, training oneself to settle for less or actually being let down. I had a manager back in my table waiting days who would start every team meeting with a reminder to communicate cook times and bar delays to our guests. He believed this approach delivered and maintained decorum. It ensured that patrons remained content, while also keeping him from having to comp an apologetic dessert from someone's tab. He wasn't wrong. The pasta always came out sooner than the fillet, and our diners deserved to know that. Sometimes, though, we get so wrapped up in what can't happen that we forget to allow ourselves to ponder what could be. That's what stuck out to me on the heels of my trip to Austin, where I covered the Formula One United States Grand Prix for ESPN last weekend. I have been fortunate enough to broadcast from the Vegas and Miami Grand Prix races, but had never attended the circuit of the Americas. While this wasn't my first F1 rodeo, if you will, I had a general sense of how race weekends unfold. Still, I'm relatively new to the sport and to the people who are deeply involved in its inner workings. Plus, I had never been to Austin before. Truly, I had no idea what to expect. I initially caught myself hedging, waffling about whether a question was too personal for the driver I was interviewing or if a take wasn't informed enough. I got nervous about whether the other journos in the paddock would accept me, or if my previous race experience would afford me mutual respect. My brain was, quite aptly, on overdrive. And then, rather serendipitously, a reporter from Sky Sports approached me and sheepishly asked me for help setting his fantasy football lineup. The ice was broken. The expectations were tabled. The adventure was on. And what an adventure it was. From sitting down with four-time world champion Max Verstappen to sweating through 3 live shows, literally and figuratively, the Texas heat is no joke, to seeing Garth freaking Brooks perform on my birthday to choking back guilty tears while FaceTiming my kids from the media center. I tried my best to step into each moment as it arrived. Rather than staying in my own lane, I swerved across the whole track, careful not to put the car in the wall, but also unbothered by a stopwatch. As a result, the experience delivered big wins both professionally and personally. That is what I am pondering as we head into bye-mageddon. With 6 teams out of the mix and numerous starters sidelined, expectations are out the window. There is no replacing Amon-Ra St. Brown or finding value versus the Raiders' defense. We can't dwell on the absences. Instead, let's focus on discovering the surprise stopgaps. This is one visit in a 17 or 18-week journey. The forecast may not initially seem promising. Yet, I guarantee the game will jolt an unassuming hero into the temporary spotlight. Rather than fret about what's missing, let's get excited about who could show up. Put these guys into your lineup. Jayden Daniels, QB, Washington Commanders, currently Fantasy's QB 18 overall. Daniels has underwhelmed in his sophomore campaign, from a fake football perspective. 2 missed games have obviously depressed his totals, but even on a per-game basis his production has been more floor than ceiling. While Daniels has posted at least 17 or more fantasy points in each outing, he's cleared 20 fantasy points only twice and ranks 11th at the position in fantasy points per game, 19.3. The exits of Austin Ekeler and Noah Brown were obstacles Daniels attempted to overcome early in the season. More recent injuries to Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel have further stymied the electric signal caller from a passing perspective, 7.1 YPA, QB 21. Unfortunately, given a potential hamstring problem and this week's matchup at Kansas City, a top 5 bounce back seems unrealistic. The Chiefs are holding opposing QBs to under 11 fantasy points when playing at Arrowhead. In fact, only 2 of 7 signal callers have managed to go over 17 fantasy points when facing Steve Spagnuolo's unit at all this season. On the plus side, Kansas City has allowed the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. While mobility is a hallmark of Daniels' game, the aforementioned soft tissue issue could subdue his rushing numbers. The Commanders play on Monday night, so there's time for Daniels to get healthy. If Daniels were to suffer a setback, however, Marcus Mariota would be in line to start. Managers might want to consider rostering Joe Flacco or Michael Penix Jr. as a possible backup plan should the news not be encouraging on by Sunday morning. Breece Hall, RB, New York Jets. The Jets have been a rough watch, averaging 18.4 points per outing, sixth fewest, since the start of 2025. While there's no disputing that the offensive inefficiencies have negatively affected Hall's production, the 24-year-old continues to see ample opportunities, managing more than 14 carries, RB11, and 4 targets, RB8, per game. In fact, Hall has touched the ball at least 18 times in 3 of his past 4 contests. He was on pace to match those numbers before exiting just prior to halftime last Sunday. Volume remains king in fantasy. And in a plus matchup at Cincinnati, the embattled RB figures to deliver solid fantasy starting numbers. Cincinnati has allowed the most fantasy points to the running back position. For context, the Bengals have given up 23 or more fantasy points to backfields in every game. More specifically, 9 running backs have logged 15 or more fantasy points in 7 different outings when facing Cincy. While questions surrounding New York's quarterback situation continue to swirl, Hall endures as the team's surest producer. His lack of red zone exposure remains a problem, but the Bengals' generosity near the end zone, 10 TDS to RBS, could help to deliver Hall his first score of the season. Relying on Hall doesn't feel great, but the facts provide him with top 10 positional appeal in Week 8. Tyler Allgeier, RB, Atlanta Falcons. Bijan Robinson has delivered for virtual investors, rumbling his way to nearly 150 fantasy points, 24.2 per game, thus far in 2025. Meanwhile, his backup has carved out a nifty role, providing some standalone value to savvy stashers. Allgeier has by no means broken the game, but he has recorded double-digit fantasy totals in 3 of his past 5 outings. Interestingly, Allgeier has logged 10 or more touches in each of Atlanta's 4 wins and fewer than 5 touches in the team's 2 losses. Betting on game script is always a dubious endeavor, but given that the Falcons are 7.5-point favorites, third largest favorites in Week 8, the 25-year-old offers streaming potential this particular Sunday. The Dolphins' defense has emerged as a balm to opposing backfields, allowing the third most fantasy points to RBS. For context, Rico Dowdle, Ramondre Stevenson, and Kamani Vidal each cleared 130 scrimmage yards versus Miami. And if you need further reminding, Quinton Judkins hung 3 scores on the Fins just 3 days ago. It should be no surprise, then, to see Robinson atop consensus rankings. Don't count out Allgeier, though. With 6 teams on bye and plenty of stars banged up, the Falcons' RB2 projects as a top 30 positional play in Week 8. Courtland Sutton, WR, Denver Broncos. Sutton might have